Evening, everybody. Welcome to the next in the long and illustrious line of courageous conversations sponsored by the Kenosha Coalition for Dismantling Racism. Glad that you're out on this last night before the snow comes in to spend it in this company. And I want to introduce this Living at the Intersection of Race and Gender, pointing out two things. First, that March is Women's History Month, and second, and also that February is Black History Month. And you hear a lot focused on one identity in one month and focused on the other identity in the other month. But you know, there's a good number of people in our society that, you know, don't have just one of those identities. You know, February and March both have special meanings, and it also reflects on how silly it is to divide things in just that way and give just a month or just a week or just a day to a certain special category. And the second thing I want to say is that there's a phrase that became important to me in 2020, which I see two ways. The phrase is, we can't see what we can't see. And it means two things to me. First, it's like an admission of incapacity, like, bless their hearts, they're colorblind and they can't see what they can't see. They can't see the difference between blue and green. So it's hopeless to try to make them see something that they can't see. Can't see what they can't see? Too bad. But the other understanding of that phrase is something much more hopeful. And it is, we can't see what we're missing. We can't see the thing that is in our way. But if somebody could make it visible, if somebody could point it out to us, then we could see it. We could learn something about it, and our lives would be enriched. When I first started hearing about intersectionality and the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, it was as if I was being shown, here is something that you didn't know that you were missing. And I'm proud to be here to listen and learn about the things that I couldn't see in the past. And I'm pleased to see all of you here to do the same thing. Welcome.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, audience. Thank you for being here this evening. Give yourselves a nice round of applause. It's getting cold out, and I'm hearing we're supposed to get some snow tomorrow, but we're gonna heat it up in here this evening. So relax and enjoy. This is going to be an informal conversation, a dialogue with our panelists up front here. There will be a time where we will have some audience attendants, if you will, some committee members who will be passing out note cards if you have a question from the audience, okay? So just kind of like wave your hand a little bit, get someone's attention, and we'll bring you a note card and something to write your question down, okay? So I have these wonderful women up here this evening. So again, I'm Yolanda Jackson-Lewis, I'm the moderator. Hello. I'm the moderator this evening, and please help me in welcoming these lovely and amazing panelists for this evening. Let's give them a big round of applause. I am going to introduce them. That's why I want you to applause now, because I want you to hold your applause until all their names are announced here. So I'm going to briefly just introduce them, and you'll get to hear and learn more about them as the evening flows, okay? So, and not sitting in this order, y'all should have said it, no, I'm just kidding. But we have Ms. Tamar Coleman from she's a Shalom Center Executive Director. Ms. Lena Cooksey is a retired educator from Kenosha Unified School District. Just wave your hand so people know, just in case. We have Miss Lisa Guerrero. Lisa, am I saying your name correct?
You are.
Okay, thank you. She's a manager, talent acquisition I can speak, from Gateway Technical College. Ms. Desiree Kendall is a Kenosha and Racine real estate agent. Ms. Jada Robinson is the Kenosha County Teen Force Advisor for the CC Coalition. Courageous. Will tell us more about that. You'll tell us more about that. And Ms. Larice Snyder is a consultant for DEI and belonging for CISA 6. Now let's give them a big round of applause. I'm going to be asking a series of questions this evening. We'll get through as many questions as time allows. I could be here all night having this conversation, but I know you probably don't want to be here, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But there's mics, we have to share the mic. Just if anybody wants to respond to a question that I asked, just kind of get the attention for the mic. But my first question, get my notes here. What has been your personal experience with intersectionality as a woman of color? If you can, give a specific example of how that intersectionality of being a woman of color has impacted you.
I can start. Okay, thank you. We don't know how to do that. Oh, there we go.
We didn't test the mic, testing.
Okay, there we go. I'll get it started. I think my situation is a little unique because coming from Latino culture, it is very interesting because we are kind of predispositioned to believe that men are more important than women. So, and it's part of our culture, even though language goes male first. So I think that that's interesting. I'll give you one example. When I got married, my father said to me that I told him I wanted to start college, and he said to me, why? You have a husband. So these are the battles that Latinos in general will face, or Latinas in general will face, because of the fact that it's already kind of understood that you're less. And so that's something I've battled with for my whole life, my whole career, in every possible way. So I think that's a very interesting part of being Latina.
You get them.
I can speak from the perspective of like being a black woman and having younger sisters and facing some of the problems that we face in our world. Like my biggest thing is, first, we always have to address the issues that I have of just being a woman of color in a space. And then oftentimes, sometimes it becomes, not only are you a woman of color in a space, you're a woman. And growing up, I always used to hear the saying of, you have two strikes against you. You're black and you're a woman. And then to growing up and trying to make a way for myself, I finally understood what those things mean, even as it transcends being in the performing arts space that we deal with women of color, because I am an actress too, on top of being the youngest advisor for a nonprofit organization sub-branch, but being a performer, understanding like roles that were created for men, and then roles that are created for women, and then roles that are created for black women. So, and then having to deal with those things of what I can audition for, what was written for me, and oftentimes I find myself experiencing thinking about when a role comes out, should I even audition for it, because am I even going to be considered for it? And so those are some of the things I deal with in my daily life of being a woman and also being black.
It's been, she talked about and okay, old lady here. Okay, this new technology. Being a black woman, for me, in my experience, has been to being a strong woman. It is important to recognize the role that we play in this universe, that we are powerful. And it is only through the fear, of males who think, oh no. But think about the roles that we play. Think about what we do in our lives, how we manage situations, how we run things. We don't get credit, but that's not important. We are the ones who are sustaining who we are as people.
So something that I wanted to add, growing up for me, I'm mixed race. I identify as mixed race, not everyone does. Some people do find that offensive, but that's how I identify. And the quandary around racial identity for me was part of the journey of my intersectionality and then being a woman as well. So I was raised by a white mom. My dad was not in the picture most of my childhood. And so just trying to understand the racial part of my identity. And then now in a professional sense, I'm in the education world, also in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging leadership. And so being in the education space, being Black was kind of my leading identity that I felt sometimes inferior or like I didn't have a sense of belonging. And as I've gone on my journey now, almost 20 years in being in leadership, in education, women do dominate in education. So I didn't feel that sense leading immediately. And then my background's in social work as well, which is also dominated by women. But now that I'm in leadership and I lead leaders, I lead principals, I lead superintendents, I lead district office, which is predominantly male. And so that switch now, I've realized my part of being a woman has really led. So being a Black woman, and you said the double negative, the two strikes, and I definitely see that. And then I add a third strike, being in diversity, equity, inclusion, right? So I oftentimes have been, one, knowing I'm going to be in rooms that I'm, the only one. And then also being bold and strong, often get coined, the angry Black woman. And so having a voice all of a sudden equates to being angry. And I am not afraid to speak. And so I think in my roles I've learned how I can be most effective, but that has taken a significant emotional toll, always thinking about how am I going to come across? How am I going to be received? How are my words going to be used against me? So that's what I think about for intersectionality, is just all of that weight every day.
Wow, thank you for that. So, Larice, you mentioned only, right? So I often hear Black and brown women say that they're the onlys in the onlys in the room, in the room at work or in other spaces. Have either of you women experienced this? And if so, what was this experience like? And what advice would you have for someone facing the same or similar challenges?
Oh, you want me to go now?
Yeah.
So, my entire life, from kindergarten to even in college, I have always been the only one in the room. I went to Forest Park Elementary, McKinley Middle School, and then I went to Bradford, where there was like a little bit of diversity. Back then, I'm old, but it was diversity, a little bit of diversity. I'm so used to being the only person of color, only woman of color in the room. It is the norm. For me. Should it be the norm? No, but it is. And so I want to ask the audience, but I want you to just reflect. If you're Caucasian, I don't care if you're a man or a woman or however you identify, if you walk into a room and everyone looks totally different than you, you walk into a boardroom and everybody's Black, and you're the only one that walks in the room and you're white, I want you to think about how you feel. You're going to say, oh, this is weird. Or, oh my goodness, am I the only one here? We don't do that. We walk in and we walk in the room. Because it's so normalized that that's how it always is. It's not unusual for us. It's unusual for you to walk into a room and be the only white person in the room. It's not unusual for us to be the only person of color in the room, especially a woman of color in the room. So my advice is be who you are, know your worth, and know what you bring to the table. And I'm not uncomfortable. I've heard people say, goodness, you're the only black person in the room. And I'll say, am I? I didn't even realize that. I'm glad that you did, but I didn't. I'm just a woman in the room. I'm a person in the room. And I deserve to be in the room. And I'm sorry that you identified me as a black woman in the room. But now that you have, let me show you why I'm in the room. So my recommendation or my suggestion to the younger generation coming up, if you know your worth and you know what you bring to the table, you go be in that room. You deserve to be in that room. And sometimes you have to break down barriers to be in that room because you're not always invited to the room.
I have just a couple of things to say. When we started talking about courageous conversations and looking at the disparities in our society, I recall that I have been in courageous conversations since I was in 3rd grade. When in the city or the town that I grew up in, our parents had to walk us to the integrated school. We had to preserve who we are in the midst of all of the chaos around us. And that's starting at 3rd grade. And it went each and every step of the way. We had, when I was a teenager, we had to march in our town because the swimming pool was segregated, the movie theater was segregated, the skating rink was segregated. All of those things were, when we were allowed that time, we had our one day. We had our one day to do these things. And when we marched with the NAACP, we marched and we opened up doors. We went to cafes and we sat down, and people really had a hard time accepting the change. Now, mind you, I lived in a neighborhood that was a mixed neighborhood, but we were always separated in the public arena. So being that only one in the room, I've always been the only one in the room. But that didn't stop me from what I wanted to do. But that's because of the courage of my community. When my community is involved in what goes on in our lives, we are stronger. And I can go on and on and on because I think my story is a good story. I think it's a one of challenge. I was hired to be a teacher in a small town in Missouri, and the principal told me, we're starting a new program. It will be for all the students who have learning disabilities, and you're going to be the teacher. I majored in English. Okay, I'll be the teacher. Now, who am I going to be teaching? Well, all the kids that are coming from the elementary school, and you have learning disabled, you have cognitive disabled, you have, and I went, all of that? And I'm just coming out of college? Come on. But it became, my classroom became the room that all the kids wanted to come to, because I was the only classroom that had a television, they had record players, and we play our music, and the kids would come in and they'd learn dances, and we just had a ball. And other teachers would say, would you please send my students back to my classroom? But they helped those kids with disabilities. They were involved in what was going on. So it's important to look at what you can do rather than what you can't do.
I'd like to add something. So I'd like to add something concerning the only in the room. I think in a leadership position that happens to me still, now less than it used to, but throughout all of my career, all of my education, every experience, I was one of the only leaders in the room of color. And that I think there's this, also this fear of like having to continue to prove yourself, to prove that you're worth it, to prove that you deserve it, to prove that you belong. And we're almost as women trained to believe that opportunities wait till somebody believes you're good enough for an opportunity instead of seeking them out for yourself. And it's a, you know, it's this continual cycle of when are you good enough and when can you vocalize and are you being too much when you vocalize. And so all of those things are a continual barrier as well for women, especially women of color. So I think that's an important part to recognize as well, that no matter how high you get, or you know, even as you're growing, that growth still continues to have a little bit of like, are you deserving? And so, you know, Tamara, to your point, you know, like going into the room and acknowledging that you belong there. Sometimes it takes a while. I know that I've been in places where a white man will say something I just said. And it's like, wait a second, I speak and no one hears me. But I will say this, because as much as I want to, you know, say that there have been these moments, it has been Black women, for me, that have shown me comfort, that have shown me opportunities for growth, that have shown me mentorship, that have stood up for me and said, wait a second, Lisa just said that. You know, great idea, but Lisa just said that. Like, so not allowing that to happen, and I know I'm kind of bouncing a little bit into your next questions, but I do feel like it's so important to acknowledge those mentorship opportunities. And there's not a lot of, for the demographic of Latinos that there are in this southeastern Wisconsin community, there's not a lot in leadership positions. And so with that, you know, like it is that responsibility of being a leader and what do you do to support the other individuals of color. So as a leader now, I make sure that that's something that I enforce, that I'm constantly aware of, that no matter what room I'm in, I make sure that that's presence is how am I holding everybody accountable to their behavior. And it's fortunately something that I do for a job now, so I love it, but it was a struggle for a lot of years.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm just wondering if, you know, what can we speak a little bit more to, if anybody else wants to add more to the effect, what effect does this have on the pressure, right, to perform work requirements? And is there anything else more that we can share how companies can make the only experience less common for women of color?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, you know, thinking as you were talking about trying to imagine what that feels like, and something that came to my mind was just thinking about, you know, the idea, one, you know, my truth is I'm kind of sick and tired of hearing about the one, the first, the only. You know, it's 2024, that just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. So. In terms of, especially like the workplace, I think about, you know, the average American works something like 2,080 hours or something like that. So just think every year, 2,080 hours or more, people are showing up as the only. I mean, that is such a toll. It is such a toll. And that additional pressure, as you talked about, Yolanda, like, people, you know, who do they go to if you're in a room, assuming who's the supervisor or who's in charge? You know, typically if I'm in a room, they're not coming to me. I remember one time I was on my way when I was actually in social work, so several years ago. I was on my way to the high school I was working at, and I got pulled over. And I remember the police officer asked me several times, like, you work there? Like, yeah, I work there, here's my badge, you know, and just having that, like, it still sticks with me, like, having to prove myself, and in several positions that I've gotten, having to prove my education, my credentials, so, and then if that's not good enough, it's, you know, so where did you work and how long, and You know, I think on the other side, and then being in DEI leadership, sometimes then there's just an assumption like, oh yeah, you know what's going on. So it's like, it almost works on the other side, and that doesn't feel good either. Like, so I don't know how to capture that maybe in words, but it's like there's always something you have to prove. Either this is what you are or this is what you're not. And that as I said before, that really is an emotional toll. And I think being that, just the privilege of being in this space right now, it's like, dang, I said to Yolanda, I said, well, now you can never say I never came to visit you here in Kenosha, but you know, I was honored to be here. I don't get to have a conversation often with other, well, definitely with other women of color, other people of color, other people who look like me. So this truly is an honor in that way, and that's, you know, day in and day out. I'm out there hitting the world and not getting that opportunity just to sit back and be like, okay, can we just have a conversation? So.
Speaking to that, some of you may know the term, like when they're talking about performance and stuff, especially for people of color, it's the unicorn. They talk about that we have to be the unicorn in the space because we are held to a different standard than sometimes our white counterparts are. And so we always have that discussion in our community. It's like, it's not good enough just for you to be good. You have to actually be perfect. Your white counterparts may make mistakes, but that's not acceptable for you. And so in return, it causes for us to put that pressure on ourselves. In Kenosha, at one point in time, they passed that racism was a public health crisis, and that's one of the reasons why they talk about those sorts of things, because stress has all sorts of impacts on your health and those sorts of things. And when you're talking about in terms of racism, it's not usually what a lot of people are looking for in terms of like the segregation and things like that. It's completely involved into the microaggressions and the sudden hidden racisms. And then when you come to work every day and you know that you have to be that unicorn, you know that you cannot make mistakes, it causes for you to try to put a ton of pressure on yourself. And speaking of like combating that Ms. Jackson-Lewis spoke about, I'll go back to when I was in high school. I went to Harvard Academy, and we were, the population at the time, like we had a small group of African Americans and Latinos in the school and along those lines, and we came together, and I was one of the student leaders, and we made what was called Culture Shock, and it was about us talking about being Black, being a minority in space, and then we took it to our principals and assistant principals and our dean, and they actually took their their teacher meeting that they had after school that was supposed to be about them focusing on other things, and they took that and they said, well, we want to have a fishbowl. And we sat there, and it was people from Culture Shock, and we talked to them about these are some of the things we're experiencing with staff, these are some of the things we're experiencing with some of our peers, and then they heard us. And so my sisters go to Harvard Academy now, and they have their deans and their assistant principals and their principals step up and they go to bat. I was also the secretary of the National Spanish Honor Society in high school, and my whole thing was I wanted to raise funds to making sure that Latino culture was prevalent and present in the school, because everyone deserves to have a space of their own. So I think to combat the only, we have to keep showing up, we have to keep confronting, and we have to keep holding people to accountability and showing them like this is what we're asking for and this is what we need to function in the space so that we're not continuously the only in a space.
Wow, thank you for that, Jada. I almost have to remember, like, oh, I'm supposed to be. I'm just so involved into the conversation. In this dialogue and sharing is great. There's one voice I haven't heard. I don't know if y'all know this is one voice. So I'm going to specifically ask Ms. Kendall, because you are Black, you identify as Black, female, and you're a real estate agent. So what barriers do you face as a Black woman in this business?
Yeah, so I am a small business owner in Kenosha, so that's already a small population. And then I just want to give you a background. Statistically, because being a real estate agent is really hard, and I don't think people understand that because they see it on TV and it looks really fun. But what you really don't know is that in the first couple of years, or in the first few years of a real estate agent, 90% are out. So in the first year of a real estate agent, 84% of them are out. So if you see someone getting their license, they're going to be out that year. Okay? So it's really hard. Right. So I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions. It looks really easy. It looks really fun. But you're a business owner, and so some of the challenges that I face too is also that only 6% of real estate agents are black. I'm on an island here in Kenosha by myself. There's
6% in Wisconsin?
6% in America. In the United States, there's black agents, okay? So I'm on an island alone. I do know some black realtors, but they're not doing business. I mean, yeah, they're selling one house. If you want to count selling one house, okay. But as a full-time agent, there's no one else I can call. There's other realtors I can call and talk to, but they're non-black. And so they can't relate to me showing up to a listing appointment and that seller saying, oh, I didn't know you were black. Sometimes I have a conversation on the phone with a seller and they listen to my voice, and then when I get to them in person, they're pretty shocked. So you guys talk about proving yourself. I have to prove myself every day. So I'm not a salary employee. I'm commissioned 100%. So every day I get up, I have to prove myself over and over. If I show up and I have braids in my hair, forget it, okay? I have to present myself in a certain way. And a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, but statistically, white sellers want to work with white realtors. They want to be in the room with someone that can relate to them, and the same with black people, you know. So thankfully, I've been able to be creative with how I approach clients. I'm out in the community, and that's important for me to get to know everyone, and so they get to know me. But everyone can't do that, and so so one of the barriers is just being out there on my own. I have no one to call, compare notes with, and I have to present myself in a certain way. I don't know who I'm showing up to see and if they're going to choose me based on how I look, what I say. And I have stellar reviews. I have the highest education. You don't even need a degree to be a realtor, and I have a master's degree. So I have to prove, you know, beyond measures my abilities, and I still don't compare sometimes. And I'm considered a top real estate agent here in Kenosha and Racine, and I still make 3 times less than my white counterparts, even with me being a top real estate agent. So, right.
Wow. Wow, thank you for that. And I see, just a reminder, if you have questions, I see folks are question people moving through the audience, so please raise your hand if you have, if you'd like to write a question. And be mindful of your questions, okay? Because if I get a question that's out of order, I'm not asking, okay? Just so we know. But you know, there's so much mentioned up here this evening already. I'm hearing, you know, the Crown Act mentioned, right? You know, the women of color in our hair, right? Code switching that we have to do. You know, how can anybody, you know, anybody speak to that? Your experience with that, or someone you may know experience with that.
Hair. So
That's a great musical.
it was a good musical. It was one of my favorite. So was Hairspray. But Desiree, she was right on about the hair. You know, You cannot show up in a corporate, I was in the corporate world for 20 years. You do not show up in a corporate boardroom with braids in your hair. You just do not. You will not be respected. They'll be like, what is that in your head? They will look at, and they won't say too much, they'll just stare at it. And it's just hair. It's just a style. Just like people are walking around with blue hair and purple hair. It's just hair. It's your identity, it's your style. But we walk in and we don't look the part. We don't sound the part. She talked about her voice on the phone. Do you know how many times I've been told I sound like a white person? Or, here's my favorite, you speak so well. You're so proper.
Microaggression. Or macro,
so well.
Okay.
And I want to ask them, like, well, how is there a different language? Is there a tone? So I love that. Or, wow, can I touch your hair? Is this all yours? Oh, we get it all. But my favorite is, you sound just like a white person. I still don't know what that means. And even my children, me and my husband's here, we have 3 adult daughters. And that's all we ever heard. Oh my God, they speak so well. They sound just like so white. And so if somebody can educate me on what that is,
yeah.
I could probably make $1 million. Because I'm going to write a book on what does it mean to speak white? Or what does it mean to wear braids in a boardroom? Or all of that. You have to dress a certain way. All of it. We go through that I have to think about what I'm going to put on to work every single day. Because when I come out of my office, when my receptionist calls and says, tomorrow there's a donor here to see you, and I get up out of my office and I come around that corner, they look at me like, I can already see it over their face. I'm looking for who's in charge. That would be me. Oh, you're the director? Yes, I am. The executive director? That would be me. How can I help you? Want to come in? I get the look all the time. Then I have to prove myself of why I'm worthy of that donation. Over and over and over and over again. I have to make sure I'm dressed appropriately. My hair is intact. I can't wear too many different things in my hair. All of that. Every day. It's hard getting dressed in the morning.
I'm exhausted.
I'm exhausted. Just getting dressed in the morning.
Well, speaking to the Crown Act, a little background about it is that we experienced an influx of students who would go to graduate from high school, and they were told that if you want to walk across the stage and they were black males, you need to cut your dreads off. We experienced some people, unfortunately, when they would adopt kids of color, they would cut their hair off and tell them that it was dirty and indoctrinating them with that. When we're talking about film and television, High School Musical, everyone loves High School Musical, one of the black stars of it. Everyone used to wear headbands because of her, but the reason she wore headbands was because a white stylist unfortunately played in her hair, did not know what they were doing, and they burned the sides of her head, so she was wearing headbands to cover up what the damage that had been done to her hair. And so that is why the Crown Act was actually created, so that way when people would go on film and TV or graduate or be in workspaces to work, they could wear whatever hair they wanted to, and they could still be seen as professional, and that they're just as educated even if they have box braids that day, or if they did silk press that day, or if they decided to do locks or dreads. And another fact of information is that the Crown Act is only passed in 23 states, and to my knowledge, I believe Wisconsin is not one of those states that is passed in.
Okay, let's give it up for the young person just teaching us. I want to hear more from Jada. Jada being black and female and repping is it millennials? You're the youngest person up here. Repping the millennials. Shout out to Jada. Let's give Jada a round of applause. Looking and listening at this young lady. Jada, how has race, gender, and age? I know we didn't talk about that intersectionality. That's like a roundabout, I guess. I don't know. But collectively, how has that impacted you, the three of those together?
Well, yes, because I talked about those double strikes before, but then thinking about third, about age. age actually serves as the baseline for if you're credible, or unfortunately if they use the term, if you're expired, what's your expiration date? And it's unfortunate that if, especially, yeah, and it's unfortunate and it's not okay, but especially in like film and TV, we have the people like Selma Hayek and the Michelle Yeohs of the world who were told that, well, by the time you get over 40, like no one's gonna wanna cast you in anything. My film director, he was on like on sorts of shows when I was in New York City. He was on like Board Empire and all those sorts of things, and he talked about how sad he feels he's like, as a white male, he said, I know that I will always be able to work in the film and TV industry no matter how old I get. He said, but I sit and look at my wife, who she picks herself apart at times because she knows that she's getting older and she does all of these things to herself and she's concerned about how she gets cast. And then he's like, and then there's people of color in the film and TV industry. And so those are things that I think about and I deal with. And being 23 years old, and I am the youngest advisor for the teen task force. And sometimes I've been fortunate enough that I've had community leaders who trusted me with the role to run a sub-branch of a nonprofit. So parts of the year I'm in charge of staff, I'm in charge of payroll, I do fundraising, I do marketing, I do program expansion, I meet with community partners and write for grants and all those sorts of things, on top of also interacting with the students themselves. So I'm the sole person that they interact with outside of the community partners that I bring in for them. And I've been fortunate to have the position, but sometimes the barriers that I run into with being 23, and then I go and I might meet with someone to try to bring in as a partner, and then it becomes, because they're older than me, it becomes that barrier, that cultural barrier of sometimes children are seen and not heard. And so then I get looked at as a child in a room and I'm saying, oh, this is what I think I need for my program. And they said, no, not you. And then they talk about my program in front of me. Like mom and dad are talking, and then we'll just come back and discuss. And so some of the things I've had to push back and say, no. I understand like your experience and things like that, but just because I am 23 doesn't make me less credible. And I do understand what the needs are of my program, and I do understand what the needs are for the kids specifically within my program. And then you're dealing with being Black, and then you're dealing with being a woman and all of those things. And so it has been challenging, but I'm thankful to be in spaces, and I have community leaders that rally for pushing our youth to the forefront.
So thank you. Let's give it up. Wow. Inspiring. Thank you. I know there's a proud mom in the audience too somewhere, right? I was blessed to be your sister's principal, but not. I'm so fortunate to be able to know you through them and your work in the community. So nice job, Jada. We're now taking some questions from the audience. Okay, y'all, some of these not we want to hear more from the real estate agent. So this question, this question is for you, Ms. Kendall. It's kind of deep. So, when you sell a Black person's home, do you ask them to remove all Black art pictures? And if so, why?
Okay, so it's on an individual basis. So in Kenosha, because the problem exists in pockets. So it really, unfortunately, really depends on where the house is and what community it's in. And that's a practice that we're really not supposed to practice, but it is being practiced. So yes, so actually for all,
ouch.
So for all sellers, I will typically tell them to just remove all things from the wall, just so that I am across the board with every seller. However, in the back of my mind, it is really, when I do speak with a Black seller, it's because I don't want them to come in and give a lower price for their place based on what they see.
Whoever asked that question, you already knew what that answer was going to be. Thank you. Wow. And we appreciate the work you do in our community and just the ways in which you give back as well. So, awesome job. Thank you. Next question. If someone makes a macro or microaggression, we talked about microaggressions today. If someone made a micro or macroaggression towards you and then they realize what they said was offensive, how would you prefer that person to recover or apologize? Just get out one thing. No, it's good.
I could just speak to that. That's one of the things that I get asked a lot, again, being in the education space. I think, acknowledging it, of course, accepting the responsibility that came to your mind, with I would say a sincere apology, not that I'm necessarily looking for the apology, but I guess it indicates that you recognize that could be something that would be offensive, the awareness. I oftentimes, people wonder, like, what should I actually say? And it may look something like, and I would say that any one of us, inclusive of all of our demographics and our experiences, could be in a position to say a micro or macroaggression. Language is always evolving, identity is always evolving, we are humans, our cultural context is always evolving, and so keeping ourselves educated is really important, and it's likely that we all will make mistakes. I have been in DEI leadership for almost 20 years and I make mistakes, so I think that recognizing that, and I find that for me it brings a new awareness. So something would be like, oh my gosh, I am sorry that came out of my mouth. I guess my expectation of someone who would want to be engaged or believes they're engaged in doing their work of their own education and understanding would have the reflection of where did that come from, because we, again, inclusive of all of our identities and experiences, are also living in common community and common society, and so even though we may have personal beliefs, we are being fed knowledge and perspectives and beliefs by our media consumption, the news, our communities, policies. So I may have this very specific experience for myself, but I am still in a bigger ecosystem that is still feeding knowledge, and so we are susceptible to what narratives are out there, and so I think just accepting that responsibility. I think one mistake that happens often is people going to a defensive place because they feel bad, guilty, shame, embarrassed, and so that sometimes it really unravels the wrong way. Like, no, I'm so sorry I said that, I'm really a good person, I do all these things, I have other Black friends, like, those are all things that are not really helpful to me, I would say. I don't know what others feel. So I think just recognizing oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that, I'm so sorry that came out of my mouth. I'm going to explore where that came from, perhaps depending on what it is and who you're speaking with, asking for the opportunity to dive a little deeper into dialogue about maybe they didn't recognize it when it came out, but they recognized with your someone mentioned the look, you have the oh, okay, and then they recognize it, or you recognize it, and I think if it's that moment, just do you ask permission? I'm a big ask permission. I talked about the emotional weight. Some days, I do this every day. So some days I'm ready to let's talk about it, and some days I have to just turn it off. I'm sorry, I can't go there today. So asking permission, I'm still not sure why that might be offensive or why you had that reaction. Could we talk about it? Maybe that's now, maybe it's later. And I think then, and how can you educate yourself so that you don't repeat that same mistake? And the more comfortable people get with being uncomfortable and asking those hard questions, and in continuous education of language. That is I love language because it's so fascinating, and it's always evolving. And so it's like always wondering, and I talked about earlier, like mixed race, that's something I identify with because I really believe racial identity, race is a social construct, and it really is fluid. And in just some spaces, my white part of my identity shows up more. It's not maybe my white part, but it's more about being mixed. And in some spaces, I'm like 100% black, right? Like that's just how my experience is. I can't speak for everyone who looks like me or has experiences like mine. But for language, asking permission, like, Larisse, I heard you say you identify as mixed race, and that might be thinking like, I just heard someone say that you should never say that. Like, is that something I can use? Is that a term I can use to describe you? Is that a term I should be using? Like, that's what the real work is engaging, because you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. There's just too much knowledge out there, too many experiences. I mean, just the few of us up here, we've heard just such a vast amount of experiences. So I think that's really what I would say is, acknowledging it, pausing, don't, skirt around and just say like, I recognize I said this and this may have been harmful to you. That could be something else. Or I'm not sure if it is, can we talk about it? So that's what I have. I think someone else.
Thank you for that. Anybody else want to address the micro or macroaggression and how someone can recover or apologize about that?
Yeah, I agree. Just basically being a willingness to learn. Another thing we talk about in like our communities as minorities is sometimes we feel like we're like the black dictionary or the minority dictionary, and like she said, that's a big thing to ask to see if someone is in a space to have that conversation with you, because not all the time do we want to be out maybe at a dinner or a gala and you're like, oh, I said something wrong, like, oh, please educate me right now. Like, we don't always want to have to be the one to educate, but we are so excited and we are happy when people have the willingness to say that my behavior was not okay, I'm not understanding something and I want to change and do better, because that's how we all as people can learn and we grow. It's just learning and taking in new knowledge as it comes.
I don't know about anyone else, but I have some new learning up here as well this evening, and Ms. Cooksey, you may have me by a few years, but I feel like I lived long enough to know a few things, but she's still so young looking. Now, she was one of my teachers, bullied junior high, when it was a junior high, okay, not a middle school, junior high. And speaking of that, this is not a question, but shout out, it says, Lena, strength, courage, and power. You are a true matriarch. Thank you for your role in taking us and as a part of the Kenosha County government. Thank you. Let's give it up for Miss Cooksey. Thank you. More questions? Okay, cut the audience off now. Okay. Oh, my mic is on? I'm sorry. I'm just, okay. Oh, it's from, okay. Dude, Cameron, that's my girl. Okay. I have to vet it first. Let me see. So this isn't your question yet, Cameron. This question, have any of you had to have the talk with your children about the legal system and law enforcement? And as a woman of color, do you feel safe in today's society? Do you see color when you look at people? Lots of questions on this card. But so have at it.
One of the roles that I play now is working with the Sheriff's Department, looking at who we recruit as deputy sheriffs, and looking at all of the situations around us as I'm talking with, asking questions of these cadets or these people looking for roles. I'm always checking how they respond to that black person in the room. And they always are very polite. until I ask questions that make them uncomfortable. And then we have to come into this discussion that makes things comfortable for them rather than they need to be on the hot seat. I want to see how you react when you are questioned by a person of color, because you're not a king. You do not hold any authority in my life right now, because I'm responsible for saying whether or not you can become a deputy sheriff.
Well,
So it makes a difference in how we respond to one another. It is important that we be able to talk with one another and to be as authentic as possible. And I think that is one of the things that I'm always concerned about. How authentic are you when you are in conversation with people of color? You don't have to tell your whole life story. I really don't want to hear it. I was a counselor for a long time. I heard a lot of stories. But when you come into those uncomfortable conversations, we have to be able to feel that you are being upfront and honest with what your opinions. If you just don't like certain people because of something that happened in your lifetime, you can acknowledge that, but you cannot hold somebody else responsible for that. And it's important that we learn how to communicate with one another. This is why the courageous conversations are essential. We have to learn how to talk with one another. You know, we're not always being accused. If I say something that is out of line, and I tend to do that a lot because I run my mouth a lot. So, but if it offends, you need to be able to say, ouch. You need to be able to say, wait a minute. And we did that kind of training in junior high.
yeah.
Learning how to say, this offends me. We learn how to live together. We are people, a community. We need to work with one another at all times.
Wow, I felt that.
I'd like to add to that.
Absolutely. I felt that when you said something happened to you, you can acknowledge that, but don't hold an entire race of people accountable for that. Wow. Look at you, still teaching me today. Go ahead, Lisa. Thank you.
So I have a 24-year-old daughter and a 27-year-old son, and my daughter is very dark complected and my son is not. And so I know that I'm a privileged minority. I know that I'm an acceptable minority. I speak white. I've been told that tons of times. I don't speak Spanish. So, you know, I'm less of a threat, I guess, in that sense. But thank you, that's so sweet. Now my daughter looks just like me. She's a mini me, just dark complected. And I've had to talk to her about, since she got her license and on, about knowing her strength, but also knowing when to pull it back. She's a very strong, spirited young lady, which I love, and I'd never take that away from her. But I also have to remind her that it is a different experience for her. I've already learned in the 25 years that I've had her, she is treated differently than I am. She will be out with her friends and they'll be speaking Spanish. And I don't speak Spanish, but I made sure to put them in a bilingual school so that they were getting that piece of their culture that I did not. So they are fluent in Spanish, both of them. But for her, for whatever reason, because of her skin color, she gets targeted more in stores. If she's speaking Spanish, people will follow her, they'll point at her, they'll tell her to stop speaking Spanish, she'll translate for somebody and she's been yelled at when she was in positions of like a customer service role. So for her, you know, I've told her about, even the way she communicates with police or law enforcement. When she was 16, I didn't have a lot of money. I bought her a car that kept not passing emissions, and I couldn't afford to get her another one. So, you know, she was riding a little dirty for a little bit, where I'm like, look, you gotta stop with your mouth, though. You can't push both boundaries. And so you just, you know, it's not safe, unfortunately. It's not safe. So with that, now that she's made me a grandma and she's driving around with this baby, I have to remind her not just of police in that situation, but men in general, people in general. You know, everyone wants to carry guns. People are threatened, men are threatened by their masculinity when you tell them no, it makes them feel stupid if you know, turn them down. So I'm constantly reminding her, like, to know when to use her strength and how to use her strength, to be cautious for herself, which is not a conversation I've ever had to have with my son, not once. Very much so.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Keep it moving. Okay. Can you comment on? Can any of the panelists comment on the phenomenon of white women tears in the workplace? And perhaps this is what the card says. Perhaps as white women do not realize we are not the true allies that we think we are or that we want to be.
I didn't hear that whole thing.
Sure. Is anyone able to comment on the phenomenon of white women tears in the workplace? Oh, okay.
I didn't.
Oh, okay. Nobody got white women crying in the office? Okay. That's good.
Okay. I can speak. I was just giving others if they wanted to speak to it. So I guess in following some earlier comments that I made, especially being in the education space, so educators, predominantly white women across the nation. So in this, you know, as we challenge ourselves to do better for our younger generation and for our children, I have experienced this often, and kind of going back to what I was saying about that defensiveness and that guilt, and not just like acknowledging like this is just what it is, right? We all are products of what we've been taught, of our upbringing, of our environments, and so just acknowledging that, I think, you know, as far as, I think that the narrative has swung a little bit too far, in just kind of casting maybe a shadow, you know, even naming it like white women tears, versus I think people do have, they have a realization that they get to maybe where that first starts, maybe a sense of responsibility, or, you know, this wasn't my fault or whatnot. And rather than just be in the moment right now, what can I do right now? And I think being able to educate yourself, like, again, the reflection, how did I have this belief? I can't be the person to take credit for this, but something I heard from, I think, a keynote at a conference a while ago, said you're not responsible for your first thought, because again, that's influence. We all have bias based on our experience, and I know people say that, but it truly is, you know, myself included, thinking like, oh, okay, this whatever it might be, we make assumptions around safety. I mean, bias serves a real function for us, right? Having physiological responses when we're in danger, you know, sweating, heart pounding, all of those things, it serves us well, and we make connections to our experiences that we've had that contribute to inform us and continue to inform us. So it's not that bias is bad, but we're not necessarily responsible, I believe, this really struck me, for our first thought. But we are responsible to ensure that we get to a second thought, and that we're responsible for our first action. So just because we have a thought doesn't mean we need to act right away. And I think that if we just take that pause, again, reflecting like, why did this come up for me? Why did I have this thought? And really go deep with ourselves. So I think, you know, that defensiveness, people do jump too quickly to being defensive about like, I'm a good person, I do all these things. You know, I think just taking a pause and not getting defensive, just saying like, why? Being curious. Where did this come from? What about my experience is leading me to believe this? And I think that in the allyship, I think the question was like, maybe people aren't allies in the way that they think. I think ally is action, so it's really taking action, and how are people showing up in the moments of action for others. One, you know, I don't know if it's easy, but one thing that I would say is, you know, if you're not sure where to start, is just by asking a question. So oftentimes people don't want to engage because they don't know, you know, they're not rocking the knowledge, as you just provided us with education about the Crown Act. So maybe you hear something, and you're like, yeah, I don't really know about it, I think I know a little bit about it. But you can ask a question which causes someone else to reflect potentially about where they're getting some sort of thought. You know, you're like, oh, I heard you say this, can you tell me more about that? Where did that come up, you know, for you? How did you get to that conclusion? Like, those are questions that we don't have to have the knowledge about, but we can certainly disrupt and interrupt microaggressions and thoughts that are not leading us down a good path. But oftentimes we don't pause because we don't want to get involved and just ask a question. So I think that all leads to that idea of you know, people feeling defensive and kind of carrying around a guilt. It's not our guilt to carry around, it's what can we do in this moment right now, which we can do. We have a lot of power in this moment to take action.
That's awesome. Tamara, before you, I want you to add on, Tamara, but I want to tack this on real quick to the phenomenon of white woman tears. What can a well-meaning white person do to make an only feel more comfortable in the room? Do we need to invite more people of color into the room?
So like them.
Can I know I'm really trying to share airtime. Oh, are you speaking to this one?
Yes, Tamara.
So the thing I'll say to this is, going back to what Tamara said earlier, is think about that experience. So just last week I had this experience, and then I'll shut up and let you go. I just had this experience. So I'm a consultant. I travel all over the state and beyond.
She did drive the furthest to be here. So
yeah, okay, so I get some time. So, you know, I've been spaces all the time. The educational, we have several consultants. So we're always trying to, you know, meet up if we're going to go to the same community or same school district or wherever we're going. And so I was with a colleague, and we were trying to meet up and meet in the middle somewhere so that we could drive the rest of the way, just to, you know, be more efficient and do some dialogue on the way down. And we're in this community, and we're driving around, and I thought there would be a park and ride. There was not, so we were like looking around, and so my colleague, who is white, said to me, oh, well, why don't we just park? It was like Walgreens, like, you know, we just park at Walgreens. So we pull over to the Walgreens, posted right there, you know, don't park here. I was like, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. So we were gonna go somewhere else, and now as we're trying to drive around a few other places, time's ticking, and now we're getting a little bit later. And so my colleague said, you know, like, why don't we just, like, I mean, I think it'll be fine. And I just look, and I'm like, I am a black woman, like, I'm not gonna be fine. And sure enough, I look out, and in the business that we were in, I was considering, there are 3 people in the window looking right at me. Like, so for this person not to consider that being, like, that's what people can do, is consider, like, well, how is Larice going to show up in this space and not assume or be frustrated when Larice is like, yeah, no, I'm not leaving my car. He's going to be towed in about 2 minutes. So that's what people can do. So I just had to share it because it was just last week that happened to me. Okay.
Yeah. Turning it off. Someone else.
So the only. You want me to repeat?
What you just, yeah.
What can a well-meaning white person, okay. What can a well-meaning white person do to make an only feel more comfortable in the room? Is it to invite more people of color into the room?
I want you to acknowledge that you understand that there's a problem in 2024 that everybody in the room looks like you. That's what I want you to do. And I don't want you to ask me, what should we do? I want you to recognize that everyone should not look like you. If we live in a diverse community, that if you look at your circle of friends, and everyone in your circle of friends looks just like you, you are missing out on so much. And you don't even see it sometimes. And so if you have to walk in a room and every single person looks like you, and you don't think in your mind something is wrong, and you're representing in that meeting the community or your agency or your company, and the people in that room don't represent those people in the company or the agency or the community that you're serving, something should come to your mind that something is wrong. And what scares me is people don't think like that. And that's why these courageous conversations are so important. It's not that we're angry or that we're frustrated, but yeah, we're frustrated. I told Ms. Cooksey today, I said,
Speak for yourself.
oh no, you're frustrated too. I was telling Ms. Cooksey today, I said, I'm getting old. I'm getting older now. And I told her, I said, I used to be able to come up with these philosophical comments and be so, like politically correct. And I'm getting tired now of having the same conversation over and over again and speaking the same message over and over again. And I remember during our civil unrest in our community, and we were at Jockey. There was a whole bunch of leaders in a room. Some of you might have been in there. We were in a circle, and I remember telling, they wanted us to go around the room. Mr. Cruiser, our county exec at the time, said, before we start, I need everybody in the room to just go around and just say your name, where you're from, and then just how you're feeling, so that we can kind of get these emotions out. So it was great, you all. Everyone was going around saying their name, and I'm just so tired, or I'm just so frustrated, all these emotions. And then I was like one of the last ones to go. And I'll never forget this. I looked across the circle, and Catherine Marks was across the room, across the circle. And I've been knowing Catherine Marks all of my life. I looked across the room, and I thought, this has got to be so horrible for her. Because I was reminded, when I was 19 years old, I worked at the Lincoln Center with Mary Lou Mahone. And I remember I was a liaison for Lincoln Middle School. And Yup, you remember that? And I remember Mary Lou Mahone would say, I was the last one to leave, and she would say, lock the door before you go. We have a meeting upstairs. And I would say, okay, yes, ma'am. Don't you talk to nobody, you just lock the door. When the last person comes in, you lock the door and you leave. And I would say, yes, ma'am. Then she came down and she said, we need some water. Can you bring the tray of water and bring it upstairs? You walk in, what'd you say, you seen but not heard? What's what you said? You come in, you put the water on the table, and you leave. And I remember doing that. And I remember seeing Pastor John Wright, my father, Pastor Joe Wilcoxon. I used to see all of these, Thelma Orr, I'm saying some names you may not remember, but these were pillars in our community that were African-American leaders. And I was so young and so naive and like, I'm just trying to go home. And I remember bringing the tray in, and I remember Mary Lou Mahone, when she tells you to do something, you do it. The exact way she tells you to do it. I put it on the table, I turned around, didn't want to make too much eye contact, but I heard enough in that 1 minute that thought, dog, we got all this going on in our community? They were talking about hiring black police officers and the brutality and the racism. And that was just in a minute, you all. I was so young and naive. And then here we sat, 30-something years later, in a circle, talking about the same thing that Catherine Marks and Thelma Orr and Pastor Joe Wilcoxon and all those people were talking about 30 years ago. And I thought, I'm frustrated. She's got to be really frustrated. So here we are, still talking about it. And guess what? As frustrated as we may be, we will still continue to talk about it. And we'll continue to still try to educate and encourage and influence and all those things. Why? Because if we stop, I don't even want to think about what happened. Oh, and one more thing. I'm sorry. I drove far too. I came from the west side. There was a question that I just really wanted about color. Who sees color? Please don't ever tell me you don't see color. Please. That might raise one of my microaggressions.
It actually is offensive.
Thank you. It is offensive for those that did not hear what she said. Because guess what? I see you as who you are, and I see your color, and it makes you beautiful. So when you tell me, I don't see color, I'm not racist, I have black friends, that is so offensive to us. Because I see that she's a Latino, beautiful woman. I see that he's a white man, an educated white man at that. We see those things, and we want you to see us for who we are. So please don't tell me you don't see my color, because that means you don't see me.
to give you the time to say that.
I wanted to say that earlier. But
Yes.
I just want to add, it also sounds like you're different than other people, or you're so articulate. Like that's all the same. Like you don't see, or whatever it might be. So I just want you to think about that, not just those words, but yeah, you're different, or oh, there's something different about you. All of that, yeah.
And you know, you all mentioned if you do not see color, that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, in the hospital, driving home in my car, because statistics are showing, data showing, things are different for us, and so not seeing the color of my little brown boy driving home might not work out too well. So, but I won't talk about that. I won't think about that. All right. Last question from the audience. I'm a black man working in corporate America for a Fortune 50 company. How are you taking your experiences and lessons learned to help the black man move forward? That ain't our job. I'm sorry. I'm not on the mic. That's for the panelists. That's for the panelists. Please answer the question.
I know where. So thank you. I have a really unique luxury of being able to advocate as part of my responsibilities in my role. So I help to create training that anybody who's hiring has to take that helps them be aware and remove their biases. I challenge them during every interview. I make sure that we're getting to skills and abilities and nothing personal. So I kind of combat those things all day, every day, and ultimately making sure we're looking as to the qualifications, how people align, what they would bring to the table, and leaving everything else off to the side. When we talk about our minority communities, there's a lot of times that there could be reasons for leaving a job, that it was a disagreement with a supervisor, didn't feel like it was a fit with the organization, and I have to challenge that idea all the time when people see that on a resume or they see that on an application, because it's not an experience that white people might experience as much as people of color. So I have to remind the hiring groups that this does not mean that they were a bad employee. We have to understand that their scenarios, their situations that they've been in, their experiences in employment might not have been great, and they're being honest about it. That does nothing about their ability to perform here, nothing. We have to consider that we all know individuals who might not lead the best, and that doesn't matter where they were at. We're looking at them for this opportunity and what they'll bring to the table here. So in those spaces, we're constantly giving those opportunities, advocating on behalf of any individual and making sure we're removing all biases as much as possible.
Thank you, Lisa. Your answer was much better than mine. Thank you. Thank you. JD, you want to?
Yes, I was going to say, for me, I have young males in my program. I have young black males in my program for the Teen Task Force, and just showing them through how I lead things, giving them the understanding of how to better interact with women and women of color, to show that how we are leaders and we can be leaders in our community. I interact with partners that are male and black males, and continuing to show up in my spaces as an advisor and as a director for a branch. And then in the performing arts world, there are, of course, males and females that are performers, and so something I do is, and I hope to finally be published, is I make scripts, and so I talk about and have those conversations of women of color in those plays. And some of them I've been able to have them produced in New York City within my cohort, or make it to the Lower East Side semifinal for the Play Festival. And it's all about having those conversations in dialogue there. That's one of my reasons for being a performer, because I believe that you can teach and educate within those spaces.
Thank you.
So I have a husband that's in the corporate world. Kind of wondering, was that his question? But I'll ask him after this.
Yeah, ask him later.
But I do want to encourage our African American men, and I don't really care what sector you're in, just show up as your authentic self. And if you do what you're supposed to do in that workplace, I hope we have advocates out there, like my sister down here on the end, that's advocating on the other side. Because we need advocators like I'm sorry, Lisa, and what was your name? Loretta. We need advocates like that because sometimes you get tired of speaking up for yourself, right? So to have that person that can speak for you or can support you on that journey, it's very helpful. So I think just for our African American men who are looking for that support, just show up as your authentic self, but then also, you know, you got to find mentorship, you got to find allies that will help you through that journey.
Thank you, and that's a whole different thing of not only sometimes being the only in the room but being able to show up as your authentic self, right? Not having to assimilate or to conform, code switch, just being able to be your authentic self. Before I invite, so last question, and before the amazing Miss Adeline comes up to provide closing remarks. Yes, she is. A for amazing. I know y'all thought it was for Adeline, but it's for amazing. But just any final words, any last words from any of the panelists? Like if there's anything pressing that I didn't ask, the audience didn't ask, that you would like to share, any final words? Yes.
So
bring the mic on down.
One thing that I would suggest for any young professionals is find a mentor. Find a mentor, person of color. It doesn't have to be in your organization. Find somebody that you can talk about how to have difficult conversations, that you know how to navigate some of these things, because, like, you know, if for my specific example, I didn't have people who were in a corporate setting or an education setting. Both of my parents were blue-collar workers, and that was the experience that they knew. They didn't provide me any guidance, insight as I was growing and climbing and seeking more education. So it's important to find people who can relate to your struggles and understand what you might be facing. So finding someone that is a person of color that's a mentor in a similar field as yours, or at least where you might want to be. And that'll help guide you to have these things in a safe space.
I just wanted to just say that these conversations are so valuable for our growth. And I just, I was blessed to have a final conversation with some of the Black leaders here in town, and with Mary Lou Mahone, with Pastor Arrington, with Thelma Orr, to have a chance to be with those awesome people. And Catherine Marks, it just dawned on me, I guess I didn't even recognize that Catherine has gone on to her reward. But these were my mentors. These were the people who really embraced me when I came to this town and really helped see. Mary Lou Mahone told me just before she passed, she said, "I'm going to find a way to use you." And I thought, what is this woman talking about? Use me? But how important it is to pass these legacies on to every one of us, every generation. Many of you know these people, and they have been very impactful in my life. I came to Kenosha for a 1-year trip, and I have been here for a long time. But it has always been a welcoming place for me. Always.
We're so blessed to have you. We're so blessed to have you.
I think, speaking on the generation, so something that's heavy in my heart that keeps me up every night is thinking about our young generation, our Black and brown babies that are growing up in this world and counting on us to get this right. And if we don't, it literally could be a matter of life and death. And I don't say that dramatically. We just experienced that firsthand, the last several years. If you weren't with it before, you got with it now. So I think that we have to get this right. And so I appreciate and want to share my gratitude for everyone showing up tonight and hearing this conversation that, takes courage for lots of people to share personal experiences, face and talk to your own community about, what's going on behind closed doors that you don't always have people to talk to. And so I just think, my final words, I guess, as you're going forward is stay committed. It doesn't have to be huge acts. I just think about who's eating dinner at your dinner table. Where are you bringing your children and grandchildren? What spaces are you occupying? I think it takes courage for people to stand up and say something, and it takes courage for people to sit down and just listen. So I hope that a sense of urgency, that you walk away with that, because our children, they're counting on us, and we gotta get this right. So that's what I have.
Yes, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this panel, and something I want you all to leave away with is, like she said, talking about our youth in Kenosha. I've been blessed. I have my mom who's actively involved in community. I have incredible mentors and leaders that always pour into me. But in Kenosha as a whole, we do have a youth retention problem, and another age bracket of youth that some people might not be aware of is that 18 to 25 bracket. We still call them youth, and our youth are, because it goes back to that child, like thinking of them as a child, even though they're adults, but they're leaving Kenosha because they're not able to have the opportunity that I've had of being put in a leadership position at an early age. They're being told, wait, and then by the time they know it, they're 30 or 40 years old, and they've yet to touch a leadership position, and then they go somewhere else, and another city is allowing them to be 20, 21, 22 and up, and running and being in a position of leadership. So if I could, a call to action is to find a youth to mentor, and you are to stand in the gaps for them. It's not, it can't be standing on top of them, and then they stand on top of someone else. No, it's you standing in the gap for them, and then when they're ready to stand up and stand in the gap, and shield the next generation. So that's my call to action.
So I don't have a call to action, I got a challenge. Is that the same thing? Is that the same thing, sweetie? Okay. Yes, thank you for this opportunity. It's not often we get to share, our experiences. And I know we've had a lot of them, and we probably didn't even touch on the surface of many of them. But I do have a challenge for all of you. If you know anything about me, I have to leave you with something to go do. So I'm going to ask you, and I don't care what race, ethnicity, gender, I want you to go and take a self-evaluation of your circle, of your group, of your friends, of your colleagues. Who do you migrate to? Who's in your circle? And do they look like you? And do they all look like you? Are they the same race as you? Are they the same ethnicity and gender as you? Because if they're not, I really want to challenge you to go find someone that does not look like you, that doesn't act like you, that doesn't talk like you, and befriend them. Learn from them. Learn from each other. Expand your friendship circle. And I guarantee you, you will change how you view things, people, situations, because you will have experienced a different person in your life. So that is, if you look at my circle, if any of you know me, my circle is very diverse. And that's intentional. I learn from other people that don't look like me. I learn from people that look like me. And so I encourage you, I challenge you to please go do that. And then I want you to come and tell me. Because I'm looking in the room, I know most of y'all in here. So I will be asking you, I'm gonna give you about 4 or 5 months. But thank you for having us, and I really appreciate you ladies sharing. I learned some stuff about y'all I didn't know, and I'm gonna call you. And but thank you, and thank you for listening to us. And I just appreciate each of you. I mean, I'm done. Next one.
Yeah, I learned a lot from the women today too. So I'm thankful to be here to share my story. And my call to action is if you or someone you know is looking to buy or sell.
today. I learned some things. I relived some things that I don't want to live again. I'm glad I'm retired because you brought back some of those traumas that I used to experience when I was in the workforce. But you have been amazing. You've covered just about every topic. My notes, I had notes, but the call to action that you all did at the end, you've covered just about all of the issues that I had identified here as to what people can do to improve things. Excuse me. Be in this watch tomorrow. You don't have that.
Okay, just push the button. Push the button, Adeline. Okay, there you go. She's not tech savvy. Somebody else. We gotta help.
It's not that. I'll tell you about it later.
Oh,
But anyway, I think this panel deserves another round of applause. And I'm just going to do some thank yous because, like I said, you've covered my action items. I can show you afterwards. Everything that I've got written on this page, you've covered. But I do want to thank the planning committee that was led by Yolanda Jackson-Lewis for putting on this amazing panel discussion. I want to thank the museum for always hosting us for our courageous conversations. I want to thank you courageous men who showed up today for this conversation. And, you know I gained some additional insight about intersectionality. If you don't know what that is, look it up. You know, you have at least 2 other factors that could cause discrimination towards you. You can be black and female, or gay and black and female. And so that's what intersectionality is. But I just wanted to mention a little bit about the Kenosha Coalition for Dismantling Racism. We put on these courageous conversations periodically because our mission is to identify and expose racism and work to bring about racial justice. Part of our mission involves educating people like yourselves on issues of racism and its subtle and not so subtle ways that it appears. And this intersectionality panel discussion actually helped raise awareness on that particular issue and how racism impacts these ladies as well as others in the workforce and in the community. I think the message is we don't want to be racialized. We want to be humanized. And we want you to see us for our value and our worth and not judge us based on our color, our hair, whatever else you want to judge us on. And as far as the action items, like I said, they mention most everything I have on this page. Making new friends, people of color, talking to women about their situations, black women in particular. And when you're in a position, I just want to add, when you're in a position to do something, when you're in a position of leadership, for example, and you can make things better, don't be afraid to do that. Whether it's speaking up about injustices, listening to minority issues and really taking them in and knowing that these are real and these are serious, advocating for people of color, supporting social justice groups, volunteering at minority-serving organizations, or taking some type of action to improve the world. All it takes is commitment and a little courage. And so I would encourage you to take what you've learned today and use it in the workplace, in your interactions in the community. As some of the panelists said, when you go somewhere and you see nothing but people who look like you, and that happens frequently, raise questions. Why is that? And how can we diversify this setting? So there are many other things that you can do, but I appreciate each of you coming here tonight, and I hope you will attend our next Courageous Conversation, which we don't have a date yet, but thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again soon.